Mr. President, I rise today to speak about the Education Reform Conference Report that I think we'll be voting on tomorrow. And I think on balance, this is a good bill, Mr. President, for two big reasons. One, it restores a significant level of decision-making power to states and local school districts, which is where decisions about things like curriculum really should occur. Diminishes the ability of the administration to pressure school districts and states into adopting the Common Core curriculum, for instance, leaving it to the discretion of the states and the school districts to decide exactly what their curriculum will be. I think that is a sensible and appropriate approach. But there's another big reason why I think this is an important bipartisan victory for kids in this education reform bill, and that is, for the first time that I'm aware of, the U.S. Congress is acting to protect our kids from pedophiles in schools. Pedophiles who infiltrate our schools and who have sexually abused children in the classroom. And Mr. President, I know that you were actively supportive of this effort, as many of our colleagues were, and I'm delighted that we were able to make it through the entire process, as painful and slow as that was. But this important provision survived this process, and we'll be voting tomorrow on the overall bill. I want to talk about this a little bit, but let me make it clear right up front that I understand, as I assume we all do, that the vast, overwhelming majority of teachers and school employees would never harm a child in their care. It would never occur to them. They would never do it. They care deeply about the kids, and that's probably a big part of the reason they pursued a career in education. But while that is a fact, it is also a fact that schools are where the children are. And the pedophiles in our midst are very, very well aware of that. And they are attracted to schools for exactly that reason. And the number of pedophiles who are succeeding in abusing children in schools is absolutely shocking. It is to me. Last year, there were 459 school employees, mostly teachers, not all teachers, but employees of schools, arrested for sexual misconduct with the children they're supposed to be taking care of. 459. That's more than one a day. And unfortunately, 26 of them were in Pennsylvania. So far, 2015 is almost over. We've already exceeded the number from 2014. We're on path to have well over 460 teachers and other school employees arrested for sexual misconduct with kids. And let's be honest, when an arrest only occurs when there is sufficient evidence to press charges, to make a case, a criminal case, in a court of law. How many more cases are occurring where we haven't had sufficient evidence to prosecute? The story that put this need on my radar, Mr. President, was the absolutely horrendous story of a child named Jeremy Bell. And this is a story, begins in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. One of the school teachers was molesting young boys. He had raped one boy. The school administrators discovered what was going on in time. The local district attorney didn't feel there was enough evidence to actually prosecute a case. You know, it's hard to fire a teacher. So what the school did is it sat the teacher down and said, here's the deal, you need to leave, but don't worry, we'll give you a letter of recommendation so that you can get a job somewhere else. And that's exactly what happened. This monster went to West Virginia, got hired as a teacher, eventually became a principal. Of course, along the way, he continued to abuse children. In the end, he raped and murdered a 12-year-old boy named Jeremy Bell. Justice finally caught up with this monster. He's serving a life sentence in prison as we speak. But it was too late for Jeremy Bell. And as a father of 3 young children, this whole idea is so appalling. It's hard to talk about it. It's hard to think about it. And we would all like to think that a story like that story of Jeremy Bell has got to be a freak occurrence. It's a once in a million years kind of thing, but that's not the case. It's just not true. In fact, it's happened so frequently that it has its own name. It's called passing the trash, and the people who spend their lives serving victims and helping the victims of these horrendous crimes to cope with them, they know about this phenomenon all too well. I'll give you some more recent examples. Just this year, WUSA News 9 reported that the school district of Montgomery County, Maryland, had a record of passing the trash. Elementary school teacher Daniel Picca abused children for 17 years. 17 years. The Maryland school district knew what was going on. And what did they do? Well, the teacher's punishment was to be moved from school to school to school, reassigning him every time a problem emerged, as though the problem is the school and not the pedophile. 17 years of passing a known child molester from one group of victims to another. Or consider the case of Las Vegas, Nevada kindergarten teacher who was recently arrested for kidnapping a 16-year-old girl and infecting her with a sexually transmitted disease in the course of abusing her. That same teacher had molested 6 children, 4th and 5th grade children, just a few years before when he was working in a Los Angeles, California school district. And the Los Angeles school district knew about the allegations. But when the Nevada school specifically asked if there were any criminal concerns regarding this teacher when he was applying for a job there, the Los Angeles school district not only hid the truth, it provided 3 references for the teacher. So strong was their interest in making him become someone else's problem. So these are examples that are all the more disturbing when you consider that according to a study by the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, the average pedophile working at a school victimizes 73 children over the course of his lifetime. So, Mr. President, we've got an opportunity tomorrow to say, enough is enough. This is enough. This has been way too much. No more. No more children falling prey to these monsters who have been able to infiltrate our classrooms. No more childhoods shattered, families devastated with grief. No more Jeremy Bells. The amendment itself is just a common sense, really it's just common decency. It simply holds that if a state accepts federal education funds, it has to have a law that bans the practice of knowingly recommending a pedophile to another school, right? I mean, is there anybody in Pennsylvania or Colorado who thinks that's unreasonable? I don't think so. As I said, I'm delighted that we've gotten to this point. There's a lot of people that I'd like to thank for their help. I got to start with Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, who joined me at the very beginning. We introduced this legislation over 2 years ago as a freestanding bill. It also, in addition to banning passing the trash, it would require background checks, thorough and rigorous background checks for any school worker who has unsupervised access to children. That part was not included in this. I'm not giving up on that. We're gonna have that fight again. But the part that bans passing the trash, that did succeed, and it demonstrated that with perseverance, the right outcome can occur. I'd also like to thank the other co-sponsors of this legislation, Senators McConnell, Alexander, Capito, Senator Gardner, Heller, Inhofe, Johnson, McCain, Roberts, Vitter, and Wicker. And I'd particularly like to thank the chairman of the Help Committee, Chairman Alexander, and the ranking member, Senator Murray. We spent a lot of time negotiating exactly how we would make this work mechanically, make sure that we had legislation that would in fact achieve the desired outcome. I also need to send out a huge thank you to all of the child advocates and the law enforcement folks around the country, especially in Pennsylvania, who worked so hard to help make this legislation happen. They were invaluable. I hope they realize how much of a difference they made in helping to persuade our colleagues here to get this done. Terry Miller and John Syriac of Sesame, who've been fighting to protect children in the classroom for decades. The National Children's Alliance and the many child advocacy centers across Pennsylvania, most of which I've been able to visit, and I'm so impressed by the wonderful work they do for kids who need it badly. the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the Center for Children's Justice, Mass Kids, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, the National District Attorneys Association, the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association, the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association, the National Sheriff's Associations, the National Association of Police Organizations. Every one of these groups weighed in on this legislation and helped us to get this over the goal line over the course of a long, protracted series of negotiations. So, Mr. President, tomorrow, I think we're gonna have an important victory in our ongoing effort to protect children from sexual abuse. As I say, it's a first. It's the first time the U.S. Congress has acted to protect pedophiles in this way. As I said, there's more that needs to be done. I still think we need to revisit the state of the background checks that are applied. There are states that do not have an adequate background check system in place. And if they're taking federal funding, which they are, they ought to have an adequate background check. But the truth is, this is a big step forward, and I'm delighted we were able to get here. I am grateful for the help of every senator who helped us get to this point. And for this reason, for the sake of this amendment, as well as the general thrust of the legislation, which is to move decision-making power back to states and school districts where it belongs, I would urge my colleagues to vote in favor of the conference report tomorrow, and I yield the floor.